Hey, welcome back to the channel. And today we are doing something a little bit different. See, I've done these ranking of castles in the past. So instead, today we are switching games to Sea of Thieves, where I will be looking at the sea forts. Now, obviously, these things are a little bit smaller than the average castle. So we're going to be looking at it a little bit differently. See, these things are a fort instead of a castle. And they really only do the job as a fort, meaning that we already know the reasoning for these forts, and that is to simply be a defense or sort of like stronghold. So with that being said, instead we will simply be looking at the defenses of this fort instead of the sort of like reasoning and all of that junk. So let's just get right into it. First things first, we're going to be looking at the actual defenses. First thing to point out is this fortress is surrounded by water on all sides, meaning that every single corner needs to have some way to defend itself. And lucky for us, it seems to have cannons on every single side of it. And this is just one layer. As we can see when we go in, there are some inside more defended cannons with a pretty clear sight outwards. And these are probably more for range artillery rather than more precision strikes from the smaller cannons on the outside. Also, real quick, before we get far into this video, please make sure to like and subscribe, and also I'm hosting some events in my event Discord, which is located in the pinned comment and in the description. So go check that out and join up if you're interested. And then at the very top, there are even more cannons. So I think we can say that no ship is gonna find some sort of weak point in this fort. So I think we can say that, at least for the firepower, this fort is doing quite well. So the next thing we shall be looking at is the resources. One of the most notable things is most definitely the dock. Now, where some people could see the dock as a weak spot in this fort, it is also one of the greatest docks that I have ever really seen. This dock is a pretty good resource system. Not only is there a full-on pulley elevator system that can pretty easily transport resources from a ship to the actual fort to keep it, running, but it is also a pretty decently defended dock. Not only are there these lower cannons to shoot any ship trying to approach it, there's also a cannon up on the very top to shoot them from any single range, as well as being right next to the big armory sort of area, where quite a few troops could be stationed to make sure that any enemy could not approach. So we can say that the dock is pretty good. That's just one of the very good systems. Probably one of the smallest little details that I bet basically no one has noticed are the drains. Oh wait, what? What drains? Well, if you look on the side of these pathways, there is clearly water running all the way out, where it actually leads to the water in the dock below. And why this is important, you may ask? Well, because we are in the Caribbean. And in the Caribbean, well, it storms quite a lot. And since this is a very blocky fort, any rain that comes down is gonna start piling up. And if there is no drainage system, then quite a few areas are gonna flood. So since they have this drainage, all the water can just go into the ocean below and things don't get constantly wet. We also seem to have a jail cell or security and a treasury slash storage room down below. We also have a kitchen with quite a few stoves on it, a war table as it looks, and some kitchen tables to eat on for the crew, as well as probably the most important thing in this entire universe. There's also a map, which is very important for a fort, which only job is to basically defend itself. Up on the sort of armory section, we see that there are some training dummies, as well as the actual armory. And at the layer up above, we have a very important thing, which is the sleeping area. Now, these forts are pretty luxurious. They have actual bunk beds instead of just hammocks. And then at the very top is where the storage room is, as well as the bell, which would be the signal for any attacks. So if you haven't noticed already, this is a multi-layered fort, with each layer designated to a role. So a quick summary on what this fort has. It's got quite a bit of cannons, I'd say roughly 50. It's got weapons, a sleeping area, a food area, and a resource management area. So it's safe to presume that this fort has everything it needs to survive. But let's say the attacker got through the line of cannons and started to invade on the fort. Well, let's just see what would actually happen. So starting off, probably the best place that attackers would land is on this bottom area here, or along another one of these bottom areas. Now what would end up happening is, to get to the dock area, there is a metal gate, which I'm pretty sure would be impossible to break through unless they had basically no resistance, meaning that they would loop around to the front door area, and that is how they would get in. Or another way that they could attempt to get in would be around here in the dock area. But this also has a metal gate, which is in the water. They would somehow have to build a vessel that has a ram on it. I'm not really sure how that would work, and I don't think one has ever been built in all of real life history. So if they did manage to do that, it would be very unlikely. Meaning that the only option would be to board one of these lower areas of the port. And, well, there are some pretty dangerous spikes here, and only a few ladders are actually on this bottom area, meaning that you really don't need too many men to station these ladders and make sure that no one comes aboard. But this is a pretty undefensive area for any defenders, meaning that the attackers, if they had a big force, would probably break through any defenses along this lower area. Which leads us to the first sort of choke point. So since the attackers can only really use one entrance, since this one is blocked off, they would all have to eventually funnel up into the main gate, which is basically just a kill zone. See, not only is it a pretty small little passageway up here, there are also these battlements, which would be very, very good for any defenders. And not only that, but up on the second level, there are even more battlements, along with some cannons, but they don't actually reach down there. But if they somehow broke through that, then they would be met with basically a single entrance into the actual fort. Which, you know, it's only a door, so they would probably break through it pretty easily, meaning that this is sort of a disadvantage for the defenders. And not only that, but there is also a second, but a very hard to reach entrance into the fort, which is one singular ladder back here, which only brings you up to the second level. And why I say this is basically impossible for the attackers to use is because they would have to run through two different full lines of battlements with defenders on them. So it's pretty impossible for them to use the ladder. Not that it makes a difference though, because yeah, this door, it is not holding. Especially because it's only really made out of wood. And in previous versions of the game, there was actually no door here. This was just an archway. So now they're inside the fort, but it is not over yet. Now it's pretty obvious, but this entire area has no defenses, so this area is cooked. And once they break through the door, the dock is falling pretty shortly after. However, advancing up to the next floor is going to be pretty difficult, since this is a very good choke point. Not only can you only fit about 2 people side to side up these stairs at a time, but because it's a stairway and how it's built, you can have people on all sides of the stairway defending it. But if they did manage to breach this way, then there are not really any defenses up on this layer, since it is pretty open. And out here in the armory, there is also basically no defenses. So this entire layer would probably be cooked. But again, if they wanted to move up to the next layer, there's another stairway with the same sort of defenses. And again, there's only one ladder that is another way up. But this is a very, very long and tall ladder, meaning that they would probably get sniped off before they made it even halfway. But again, if they managed to make it all the way up the stairs, this floor actually has some defenses. Not very good ones, but these bed frames will at least provide some sort of cover. And how the room is laid out, any of these little defensive areas are all focused in on the stairway, making it very difficult for them to come up. But again, if they did somehow come up, they're met again with another stairway, which is the same way to get up as the ladder outside, meaning that this is really their only way up. And this stairway is probably the best defended one. Not only can you, again, focus in on the stairway on any side, but there's also a little half wall here, which is gonna provide some pretty decent cover in case the attackers try and shoot back when they're on the stairway. And if they do manage to clear this entire upper area, I bet you cannot guess how they get up to the final floor. Yes, again, it's another stairway with even more half walls. And I'll just mention it here. In order to get up the first stairway to this level, they would also have to deal with all of these defenders up at the very, very top. So if the fort had about 100 men, this entire upper floor would be basically impossible to breach. And even if they do start to push back the defenders, guess what? There's a little storeroom here, which not only has an actual door and is lockable, but if they manage to breach in somehow, there are not only these defensive areas, but in earlier versions, and I don't know why this one doesn't have it, there is a little trap door that can be opened up as a sort of like secret escape attempt for any remaining defenders, where they can either, I don't know, somehow jump through this window or just be very sneaky and get out of the fort. So I think it's pretty safe to assume that this is a very unbreachable fort, meaning that the only thing that the attackers could do is try and bombard the fort from their ships and try and wear down the defenders. And at the same time, they would have to deal with the cannons on the fort, as well as defending snipers with all these battlements. And even, there are little watchtowers with some slits in them to shoot back at the attackers. And even if the bombardment went through from very, very far away, this fort is so well supplied that it would be very, very difficult for an actual sort of naval siege to happen. And even if their supplies did start to dwindle, remember that little port down here? Yeah, well, this thing is pretty secretive, actually. And even if the attackers did know about it, little rowboats can come through here pretty stealthily and get more supplies to the fortress. So, with all that said and done, I think it is pretty safe to assume that this fort is impenetrable. So, I gotta say, good job, Rare, for making an actual good thing in your video game. Thanks for sticking to the end of the video. And actually, I'm kind of wanting to test the theory of these forts and host a 10v10 fort defense once the custom servers come out. So if you're interested in that, then again, make sure to join my event server in the pinned comment and the description.